Okay, here we are, Think Tech Talks, and we're talking today about the state of energy in Hawaii. We have a special guest. It's Raghu Belur. He is the co-founder, vice president of products of Enphase Energy out of California.
Yep.
And he's doing a lot of business here in Hawaii, so we need to talk to him, find out what's going on. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you for having me on your show. It's a pleasure.
Nice to see you here. We spoke before. We had some time at Starbucks, and you know, at Starbucks, you learn the mysteries of the universe, I think.
Absolutely. Lots of problems in this world have been solved over a cup of coffee.
Yeah, Think Tech was founded at Starbucks, I'll have you know, the very same place we met. Anyway, I wanted to ask you, well, what's going on with Enphase Energy? You guys are very active and increasingly active in Hawaii, so what's the latest?
Again, from a product pitch standpoint, we are very excited to announce a new product. It's the M250. It's our next generation. It's generation 4 of our microinverter product. It comes with more power, more efficiency, makes it easier to install for our installer partners. It's the next step in evolution, and it's a company. If you think about the way the DNA of Enphase is continuous innovation. And hence, you're seeing, in our seventh year of existence, we are on our generation 4 of our product. And
now wait, your product is a microinverter.
That's
correct. What I get out of that is that it's a lot to do with photovoltaic.
That's correct.
What exactly does it have to do with photovoltaic?
So, if you look at the way photovoltaic or PV systems are deployed, traditionally they've been deployed with many many panels connected to a single large inverter. Think about it like mainframe computers. We came along in 2006 and said, hey, no, there's a better way to do this. What we came up with is where we have a microinverter associated with every single panel. Think about it like PCs, where you have intelligence buried into every single panel. There are 4 advantages to doing it that way. The first one is everybody's heard about the Christmas light problem. If one of the light goes out, the rest of the system, serial versus parallel. Exactly. So in a traditional system, that's one big disadvantage is you have a Christmas light problem. If there is any impairment of light on one panel, it impacts the entire system. So we solve that problem.
So you don't want to have a serial situation.
That's correct.
Are you also saying you don't want to have the intelligence on every panel?
No, we do. We do. All our intelligence is on the panel. All the power conversion and intelligence occurs at the panel.
So there's many microinverters instead of one big one.
That's correct. So, and all these panels and microinverters, they're independent energy producers, and they're all connected in parallel. So you produce more energy effectively as a result of that. The second thing is, because you're maximizing the output of every single panel, and the impact on the performance of one panel is not dictated by the other panel. Okay. Which is the Christmas light problem.
Okay,
so you produce
so each
more
one
energy.
has a direct connection to the ultimate
to the grid, to where it's connected.
Right. Okay.
Right. The second big advantage is reliability. You don't have a single point of failure. If that big central inverter or string inverter fails, your entire system goes down. Whereas in our case, if you do have a panel or an inverter problem, only it's isolated to that. So you get much more production in that sense as well. And plus, it's a small piece of electronics as opposed to a big power converter. And a small piece of electronics processes low amount of voltage, small amount of power, so it can inherently be made much more reliable. And I want to touch upon reliability in the context of Hawaii particularly. When we first started the company, we looked at, hey, all the geographies that we were going to deploy in, and Hawaii was a crucial area as well, where we thought, wow, it's a highly corrosive environment because of the salt content in the air. And so we had to make sure that that we took that into account in that design. And every generation of that of our product development takes that into account in its design. So there's a word you'll hear, it's called NEMA 6, meaning this thing is built like a brick. You can really practically run it underwater. We don't recommend it, but it can be run underwater. So we pay
How big is it? I mean, for each panel, how big?
It's about that big, roughly the size of...
How thick is it?
It's about an inch thick.
Inch thick, and right. It clips onto the panel?
You can, in some instances, it clips on the panel, or it attaches to the racking itself, where the panel, the railing that the panel sits on.
And it is the connection between the panel and the wires that go out.
That's correct. So there are 2 wires that come from the panel that connect to the microinverter, and then there's AC. You produce AC directly from the panel.
Sure. Okay.
and you get AC, and that this is 240 volt AC that's used in your house that gets fed into your home circuit.
So it'll withstand rain, snow, corrosion, whatnot.
Everything it's
we
been
don't have
built.
too much snow.
Yeah, you don't have, and you don't have extreme temperatures either. But we are designed to run from minus 40 degrees C all the way to plus 65 degrees C.
What is the secret sauce in this thing? I mean, what kind of PhDs do you have to design it? What kind of patents do you have on it? And what is the secret sauce in general?
So
you can tell them. Tell them the secret.
Oh, the secret sauce. I'm happy to reveal the secret sauce. My boss won't be happy about it, but let's take a crack at it. I think when we first looked at the problem that we are solving, right? We're Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. We think about, hey, how can you do something better? We are always thinking about that. What is it? Always question the status quo and always ask, hey, how can you make a product better than it's been? And so when we first looked at the topology of the big centralized power conversion, we said, no, there's a better way. Hey, why don't we do it using microinverters? But that's not trivial, right? In that you have to be able to start with very low voltage, because now your voltage just comes out of one panel, and you're going to get to 240 volts. How do you do that power conversion very, very efficiently, right? And at the same time, make something that sits on your roof and in a corrosive environment like Hawaii, make it very, very reliable.
You want it to last for 30 years. Right?
Exactly, and it is going to last, and design a system that's going to last for 30 years. We also, I mean, my background is, and a lot of our people in our company come from software companies, networking companies like Cisco. I came from Cisco Systems as an example. Our CTO co-founder also came from Cisco and other telecommunications companies. We never think about power conversion in isolation. We always think about a system. So when we went about doing this, and the secret sauce again was high efficiency power conversion, high reliability power conversion, while being part of a bigger system. What I mean by that is we have communications embedded into every one of these microinverters. They all communicate back to our servers. And
so
you can visualize.
Kind of electronics network.
Exactly.
And it's sending messages to all the other ones.
It's doing power conversion, and it's sending messages back and forth to ensure that the health of the system, ensure that the system is operating properly.
Okay, so the software is very important.
All those elements are very important. The power conversion piece, the communication piece, and the software and management piece is vital, and that's what constitutes the Enphase microinverter system.
So is it like a little computer or firmware, a little chip? How does it work?
A great question. Again, this is part of the innovation. It's a digital design. It really is very similar to say your cell phone, right? Where there is hardware and there is lots of software that's running on it, and it's all digital. It's a digital device, and it's got a smart processor running in it. It's got our own chip running in it.
So it uses some of the power that comes off the grid in order to run its functions.
Actually, it uses the power off the panel itself to power itself, to power its own internal microprocessor, and do the power conversion.
Know the difference.
And do the power conversion as well. Now you have to do that very efficiently and very reliably.
Anybody else do this kind of thing?
There are people who tried in the past, couldn't do it, and then we came along and we took a different approach to it. We took a more bottoms-up approach where we said we're going to design our own. First, we're going to architect it in a different way. We're going to make it a completely digital architecture. We're going to design our own semiconductor, our own ASIC, which is the heart of the system. We did do that. We are actually on our 5th generation of our semiconductor. We have a pretty big team that does nothing but chip design.
How big is pretty big?
We've got almost 35 people who are doing nothing but the design of the chip. The engineering team is much, much bigger than that, because they're doing power electronics, the semiconductors, the communications, the software, etc.
All this is subject of multiple patents?
Oh, yes. We have about 100 plus patents that we have filed.
Serious?
Oh, yes. And there is a lot of innovation, a lot of IP.
How big is the company? Is this public yet?
Yes. We went public last year in 2012. We are roughly 400 people in the company. I'd say.
Thank you for coming down.
Absolutely. Hawaii is a very, very important market for us. And Hawaii was one of the first markets that we sold into back in 2008. We have those partners who purchased a product in 2008 are continue to.
So how have you found the Hawaii market? I mean, obviously you've been in the market in the mainland, in California especially. There's a lot of PV going on.
Right.
How do you find this market? You know, how is this market different from the other markets?
I think Hawaii is a very interesting, case study for solar and solar deployment. By the way, I flew in this morning from San Francisco, and it's just thrilling to see the amount of PV that you see.
You can see it as you fly in.
Absolutely,
Sure.
as you come flying in, and when you are obsessed about PV like I am, you look for panels everywhere. Having said that, roughly it's, I don't know, I can do the rough math, but about 1 in 10 homes have PV. I say maybe
Sounds about right.
1 in 10, 1 in 12,
Yeah.
which means we still have a long ways to go, right?
True.
We got to get to every
we have to
single
talk
home.
about storage. We're going to talk about that soon.
Absolutely, yeah. And we got many homes to go to. California does not have the density of Hawaii by a long shot. So I think while there are opportunities in Hawaii, there are also challenges that it poses, that level of density of PV. And I think
But
smart inverter systems.
Here because why? It's a laboratory, because it's a good market. I mean, are you saying that other 90% is why you're here? That you want to help increase the density, and you think we can, or you can, or we can work together, and it can happen here?
Absolutely. I think Hawaii is a fantastic market.
People are agreeable to photovoltaic.
Precisely. I think there is great community support, very good policy support behind it. There's the desire to keep jobs local. There's the desire to not import any more.
You're worried about the demise
oil.
of the tax credits? Because it's coming.
I think those are normal evolution of the industry. I think at the appropriate time, not having subsidies. I'm a fan of a world where we are free of subsidies at the appropriate time. I think it's coming. I think you're seeing that elsewhere in the world as well. You're seeing that a lot happening in Europe. Hey, look at California. California, the state subsidies are almost gone, are almost done.
But
yet the market's doing really well. And I think there is the desire for PV, but at the same time, it makes financial sense.
Well, but there are limitations. I mean, for example, I mentioned to you before we began that Marco Mangelsdorf, who is a PV installer in Hilo, I think, wrote an article for Civil Beat, appeared a couple of days ago, I guess Friday, for the proposition that, in fact, PV installations are going down, and for specific installation, events, the amount of PV is going down. Now, he may be wrong about that, but that's what his data told him. That's what he reported. And I guess I'm interested in your thought about that, your comment about it.
I think there's a very interesting shift that's taking place in Europe. I cannot tie it to Hawaii on the size of the system. As incentives are decreasing in Europe, people are moving more towards self-consumption, which is they're not exporting any. Europe was all driven by feed-in tariffs, and as feed-in tariffs decrease, what people are being motivated to do or driven towards is, hey, what I generate, I consume. So there are a couple of things that need to happen there. In some instances, there is behavioral change, right? Hey, why don't you run your washer, dryer, etc., other equipment at the time of solar peak, right? That's one behavioral change. But I think there's another very interesting thing that you can think about. You can say, hey, everybody puts solar south-facing. What if we were to put solar east-facing, if possible? Some panels east-facing, some panels south-facing, some panels west-facing. So you can shape the curve of the production to what you're.
Right, and that's only a couple of things you've mentioned. There are more too. But let's take a break here for a minute, Raghu. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. This is State of Energy with Raghu Belur, and we're talking about Enphase Energy, and we're talking about PV microinverters that you wouldn't believe. We'll be right back. except at the beginning here. We're back. We're Think Tech. We're live. We're talking about the state of energy, and specifically we're talking with Raghu Belur of Enphase Energy that makes microinverters, new kinds, high-tech microinverters, and is installing them all over Hawaii. We're talking about the state of energy, the state of PV in Hawaii, because that's where it's connected with. You mentioned a couple of things before the break about how PV in the world, in the ecosystem of energy, is changing, and we've seen that in Europe. We're probably seeing some elements of it on the mainland, and we will ultimately see it here, namely distributed PV. You know, and just a few days ago, the PUC put a delay, a damper on the undersea cable here in Hawaii, and they put a damper likewise on big wind. So PV seems to be emerging, Raghu, as the leader here in Hawaii. Nobody really objects to it next door. You know, everybody likes it. They want to see it, but there's the problem of you know, being firm, and the problem of working at night. I mean, your point, for example, about facing the cells, the panels, to various directions actually helps, but it still doesn't solve the problem of what happens at night. And I always make my little gesture about a transistor that can hold lots of energy and be strapped together the same way that your microinverters are strapped together with sophisticated software to hold energy on a very large scale. And if you can do that, maybe that's your next product, right? If you can do that, maybe you won't talk to me ever again. You'll make Bill Gates look like a piker. But you know, that is ultimately the barrier, isn't it?
I think storage, if I'm assuming you're referring to storage, is a fascinating problem, right? I think, but there are many elements to the storage problem to solve. I think the harder problem is the chemistry. And we're not chemistry people, so we don't solve the chemistry problem, and a lot of people are looking at it. But I think we have some very interesting ideas, as you can imagine. We always think about better ways to doing things. I think we have some interesting ideas that we're looking at to make the storage problem from a power conversion, energy efficiency standpoint better than what it is today. So there are definitely innovations going on in that area. But I think, you know, you're right. The chemistry is a hard problem to solve today. It'll eventually get solved, and by definition, solar being an intermittent resource, you do need to be able to deal with it. But I think if you think about it, it's still the perfect distributed generation product, if you really think think about it. Wind doesn't, you know, you can't put a wind turbine in the middle of
No, and you know, the
town. It's just not
reality is
gonna
our
work,
cities get more crowded. People are more jealous of their prerogatives next door. They don't want to be, you know, they want to have a little space. They don't want to see a windmill on top of the next house. Nobody is really troubled by PV.
And it isn't, because I think it's beautiful. I think it looks really nice on your rooftop. You know, your generation is local to where your load is, so you don't have to deal with issues like losses and all the other management.
What about those farms, though? The PV farms, you know, we've had a few of them built here, and they seem very promising. You know, they're not that big. They're I don't know, a few hundred panels out in a field, maybe a field that would not be useful for anything else. And the utility takes the power.
You know, I think if the economics can be made to work, absolutely, it's a viable solution. In that sense, you know, you get the best of both worlds. I mean, distributed generation, where you're consuming the load being the generation and load being aligned perfectly on site, is a very good thing. At the same time, I don't see any downside to centralized generation as well, using PV technology.
Yeah, because some buildings can't have the PV on them. So you know, in the world going forward, you have to have some way to provide power for those buildings. You know, it'd be very cool to provide them with a farm.
Absolutely, I think it's,
and
you
your
can
stuff
see both.
works on those.
Oh,
I mean,
yes,
your
we do.
microinverters work on any kind of installation. Am I right?
Yes, I mean, in the mainline, I think we have done megawatt installs in the mainline. I don't think we have done a megawatt install here in Hawaii, but you know, hopefully sometime soon one of our partners will do that. But no, absolutely, the technology scales up from anywhere from 1 panels, you know, to all the way to 20,000 panels in a 4 megawatt installation.
This raises the question in my mind about, you know, if you have an existing facility, whether it be just a residence or maybe a PV farm, that you could come with your Enphase, energy microinverters and upgrade, upscale make more efficient that particular facility. Can you do that? Have you done that?
It can be done. It's not done that prominently because there's just so many new installs coming online that
they're moving too fast.
They're just yes, exactly.
Can't keep up with them.
Yeah, and so a lot of people, the greenfield installs are happening at such a rapid rate that it does happen sometimes. Or what I've seen happen more often is people extend the size of their system, so they make their system bigger. And given that we coexist with the existing technology, the old traditional technology as well, so they just go out there, and if you have, say, for example, a 50 kilowatt install, and you want to extend it by another 50 kilowatts, they may now choose to put microinverters, build a microinverter system. I've seen that happen more than going back there.
It's like elevators. You build an elevator, and you know that at a certain point in time, the elevator is going to have to be remodeled.
Right.
So you want to build the best technology in the remodel to make it like new. So query, I mean, what kind of price point are we talking about? How does incorporating your product? What is the name of your product anyway?
It's the generation of product that we just announced called the M250.
You mentioned that M250.
Right.
So if I put an M250 in, how does that change, if at all, my calculation, of keeping up, you know what I mean, of the useful life and so forth?
Absolutely. I think it's a financial decision. I think solar has made that shift, where while people, 5 years ago were doing it for altruistic reasons, now people are thinking, hey, it makes financial sense to install solar. So
does yours cost more than the next guy?
So the inverter itself may cost more, but you have to really look at it at the cost of energy.
Because you're doing greater efficiency, so
yes,
you're getting a better payload on it.
Precisely. It's easier. It's starting with, it's much simpler to design, it's much simpler to install, it's much simpler to maintain. So there are some cost efficiencies there. And then finally, it's more reliable and it produces more energy. So you have to take all of those things into account, and it is ultimately a dollar per kilowatt hour decision, rather than, hey, upfront capex or a dollar per.
But you would argue that when they install your M250 product, they're actually going to have a better deal in terms of the payback.
Absolutely, and it shows in our market share. I think there was just a recent announcement that we had the highest market share in all of North America for single phase inverters or residential inverters. I think we have close to 40%, in the high 30s or 38 to 40% market share. So every every third system or so or more is an Enphase microinverter system that's being installed because our partners and the end consumers value what we bring.
If you're putting in some, a device that will last for 30 years, a system will last for 30 years, you want the best.
Right.
I would want the best.
Absolutely.
For sure.
You're in it for a long period of time.
Yeah.
So
reliability is everything.
Reliability, greater production, and then for our installer partners, hey, much easier to design, install, and maintain.
Yeah.
So I think we are rewarded by our market share numbers.
So how are your market share numbers in Hawaii? How long have you been marketing in Hawaii, and how are you doing?
I think we're doing well in Hawaii. I think we're doing really well in Hawaii. Hawaii's been a very, very strong, very good market for us. And again, I think because people are definitely more sophisticated in Hawaii as it pertains to solar.
Well,
because there've been so much solar out here.
Hundreds of installers here for a relatively small population.
And there are, I think we probably 40,000 installs, somewhere in that order. I think we are probably approaching. Enphase itself is probably approaching 25,000 installs. That's what I heard.
Okay.
So the market's been very, very good for Enphase. So the numbers are a little bit hard to come by in Hawaii, unlike California, where there's very, very detailed record.
You work with the installers, or you work with the panel providers? We
work with our installer. We actually do both, but primarily we work with our installer partners. We train them. We share with them all the data that we have, and we help them with in the process. So we work very closely with our installer partners.
One of the things we always ask in our discussions, especially about energy, is where are the challenges? Where are the footfalls? Where are the things you have? What keeps you up at night?
Oh, absolutely. Nothing. I mean, when you're trying to change the world, there's always challenges, as you can imagine. And
you're
solar,
carving it out of whole cloth. It's quite amazing.
So solar is changing the world, and so anybody who's in the solar industry will attest to, hey, it's while everything's the market's growing really well, it's not devoid of its challenges. So the one area that I think about is as more and more PV comes online is solar and its relationship with the utilities. I think that's going to be, I think there are some tough questions. There are some tough questions to answer. There are things such as stability of the grid. You have to answer things such as net metering, and both policy and technology challenges exist as we go further, as more and more PV comes online. So I think that there are some interesting discussions to be had. And I think the important thing here is we have to think about this as a collaboration with the utilities and trying to figure out, hey, what's the best way going forward? Let's be pretty frank about it. PV is here to stay, and PV deployment's only going to accelerate. So what we have to do is think about, hey, how do we work with the utilities in understanding things both on the policy side as well as on the technical challenges side.
Now you mentioned the net metering,
right?
And then of course there's the feed-in tariff, which is relatively new.
Right.
So I'm just wondering which one you favor as a matter of policy, where the policy issues are in terms of sending power back to the utility.
I think I'm going to up-level this conversation a little bit. My long-term view is at the right time I don't want any of these subsidies, right? I want to be I want organic growth, and I think there are countries that in Europe that you're seeing that are really doing well with no subsidies. We're not there yet, but I think we have a line of sight to it. As far as, I don't want to pick sides on one policy versus the other in terms of net metering versus feed-in tariff. I think what's more important is not talking past each other. I think, avoided costs, low distribution losses, etc., are some of the things, benefits of that PV people would say, and then obviously the utility folks are saying, hey, what's the impact of net metering as it relates to people who do not have PV? So those are conversations. I think research needs to be done, the analysis needs to be done, and the conversation needs to be had. I think that's more important rather than trying to take extreme positions. I think taking extreme positions doesn't benefit anybody.
Well, for example, I think this might be happening, or I believe it will be happening. And that is that homeowners who have PV are going to be asked to pay more of the share of operating the grid, and that seems reasonable because if they get along at a $16 or $18 monthly minimum, they're getting a terrific benefit, maybe too much, considering the fact that the grid is still out there helping them at night and so forth. Right. I think there's a lot of things that will change in order to equalize and settle down on these issues you're talking about.
I think there have been discussions. Again, I point them out as discussions. They have not been had in a context where all variables have been taken into consideration. So should homeowners be paying an interconnection fee?
Yeah.
For being on the network? Is there a migration going to take place in the utility model towards how the telecom industry evolved, or the wireless industry, or cell phone industry evolved?
Yeah.
Those are all discussions that are happening. I think there is actually some research going on in California to understand the benefits of PV vis-a-vis net energy metering, etc. But I want to come back to that analysis needs to be done and the discussion needs to be had. And it has to be had in a collaborative fashion. I do see sometimes, people taking extreme positions, the PV folks taking extreme positions, the utility taking extreme positions. That doesn't help anybody.
No, it doesn't.
And I think the good news is that it's all, being discussed.
Yes.
It just needs to be discussed more amicably and more, you have to come to a conclusion. And I think it's happening. Research needs to be done, and I think that research is happening right now.
We're going to take a short break again, Raghu. This is Raghu Belur. We're talking about Enphase Energy and its M250 microconverter and the deployment of that technology here in Hawaii. This is the State of Energy Think Tech Talk. We'll be right back after this break.
It's fascinating.
Okay, this is Think Tech. We're talking about energy, the state of energy. Is in a Think Tech talk here on a Monday with Raghu Belur of Enphase Energy. He's a co-founder and VP of products there. And they got a product called the M250 microconverter for PV in Hawaii. They've had great success on the mainland, and they're into the Hawaii market big time. And we're having a great discussion about exactly where is PV going. I think we've agreed that everything is changing. We're in a swell of sea change right now, and you really have to watch the changes. And in fact, so I want to ask you, this product of yours, does your product change with the times? Does your product change with the changing circumstances of the technology around the panels and grid technology and so forth?
Absolutely. I think that's fundamental to our architecture. When we think about when we first architected the product, it's almost a software-controlled device. It's a fully adaptable system. And I think what we have to recognize is as PV penetration continues to increase, the grid conditions are going to change. We all know the load conditions are changing, and we also have seen environmental conditions changing. So when we think about designing products and designing technologies, you always think about future-proofing, right? Because PV systems have to last 25, 30 years, how do I design a system and install it today that can adapt itself over time, right?
Well, that's really magic, because you don't know exactly over time what's going to happen.
So
you have to guess around the corner.
Precisely, to the extent possible, you want to design a system that's pretty flexible. And I think you see that, we have seen examples of that even here in Hawaii, where one of the utilities called us and said, hey, there's so much PV that it is starting to cause some disruption in their grid. And they said, can you make some changes to your inverter, to your microinverter, and to help us stabilize our network?
And you said, of course.
And we said, absolutely, we can do that.
What kind of changes?
So I think as PV penetration continues to increase, you're seeing, the voltage and frequency trip limits as an example. Per standard, we're supposed to trip offline at a certain voltage and frequency at the voltage and frequency limit. But in Hawaii, given that the relatively smaller population and relatively smaller load, as more and more PV comes online, it has an impact on the overall network. And so one of the utilities called us and said, hey, can you extend your voltage and frequency trip limits? It'll help us stabilize our grid. We said, absolutely we can. And we looked, we have a very sophisticated software system as well. And we saw we had about 400, they wanted us to make the change on about 450 systems that they have. We were able to do it remotely from California. We were able to, through firmware, because we have full bidirectional communication. We were able to go in there and upgrade the system.
And this could happen again and again.
And it can happen, and I think it has to happen. So I think that's how we think about it. That's how we think about when we talk to our partners, installer partners, and we try to educate them and say, think about systems that have to, that should be able to adapt itself, right? And don't think about. You're not installing and it's not install and be done, right? The system has to last for 20, 25, 30 years. How do you make it future-proof to the extent possible?
So M250 is just one product. I suppose you have another one coming down, which is even more
absolutely
adaptable.
So we are continually evolving. We are continually innovating. We just released the M250, but I'm talking about even the previous generation of our product, which was the M215 microinverter. Mm-hmm. Even that has the capability. In fact, some of these changes we did remotely for this particular utility was on the M215, not the M250. The point again being, if you have architected it in a manner, if it's software driven, if it's got full bidirectional communication, if you have extensive software to manage it, you can do these things. And I believe that it's a requirement as you look at the evolution of PV. Jay, you and I were just talking in the break. Today, if you look at, there are 70 million households in the US. PV penetration is at 0.3%. Hawaii is much higher, but overall it's at 0.3%. Our vision is, how do you get PV on all 70 million households existing and those 1 million new homes that are built every year? And in order to do that, there have to be a lot of changes. The policy side, awareness side
And the utility
technology side. And obviously our utility, we have to work in partnership with the utilities.
I just wanted to ask you
happen.
on the change of the firmware. Is it that your ability to change the firmware connects you to the microinverters so that the microinverter needs signals from the internet in order to keep functioning, or is that just a software download, which is not necessary for the microinverter to work?
So the microinverter does not need any interconnection with our servers, does not need it. It can work completely autonomously. In fact, it can perform some of these, what we call as advanced grid functions, grid stabilizing functions autonomously as well. There are benefits to being connected to the network.
Right.
You can monitor and you can manage.
But you don't need it in order to operate.
No, absolutely, you don't need it.
The other thing I wanted to ask you, and we talked about this at the break too, and that is, you have this great possibility of adapting to changes, and we know there are changes taking place as more PV comes online. Utility has to change. So if you go to the other side of the street on the utility side, in terms of having a smart grid, ultimately, soon enough, they're going to need really sophisticated technology to deal with the ebb and flow of photovoltaic, whether it's net metering or feed and tariff, the exchange of power. Are you going to be in a position to help them, not with this product, but with a product that looks at it from their side?
Absolutely. I think if you think about it, for the first time, if done right, for the first time, the utilities will have information, intelligence deep in their network at the customer's premise for the first time. Because we have communication, you can communicate with it, you can alter its behavior, you can look at how that system is behaving. I look at this as an extension of, one could look at it as an extension of the utilities network. So there's intelligence.
All that data.
You're getting data and you can react to that data.
And you would provide that freely to them.
Well, we can talk about the free part, but I mean, my point is there is data now, intelligence now, really deep in the network. It becomes an integral part of the entire network to help. This is the part where PV plays a role in stabilizing the PV's network.
Yes, it's got to go there, don't you think? It's got to go there. And as the whole thing moves forward, the integration becomes all the more important. But it still leaves, I make my gesture with the little transistor that holds all this power that could be a new storage device without using lead acid or reservoirs or anything, I hope you're working on that.
It's coming. I have great faith that the problem will be solved. I don't know in what time frame, but for sure. I mean, I live in Silicon Valley. I work there.
There are people working on storage in Silicon Valley.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. There is work going on in universities. There is work going on in industry.
Tell me, in your mind's eye, we have a few minutes left, and I would like to discuss your view of the future. Where is Enphase going to go over the next 5 years? Where is utility technology going to go? And how do you see this evolving toward a system where PV really is king, but the utility can handle it. It doesn't have to curtail, and there's a sort of a harmony between what's given and what's given back.
I think we will continue to innovate on the power electronics side. Continue to make innovations in the microelectronics side, on the power conversion itself, with communications, the software, the interaction with the utility. Provide advanced grid functions to help stabilize the utility. I think those are all needed. First, I think the big picture is we're not getting away. Solar is here to stay, and actually solar is going to be the way to solve the problem with climate change. I think it's about, in my mind, probably the only way to solve the problem of climate change. Our vision is going beyond 70 million households in the U.S. How do we get PV on all households? 70 million households in the U.S. But how do I get PV on every household in the world? We think about but that will take not just Enphase. It'll take broad community support. It'll take policy support, and it'll take support from our friends in the utility as well. We have to be able, given that the device sits on the grid, we just have to figure out a way to work together and understand what are the challenges in scaling to 70 million households in the US. How do you get there? And if you have the technology, and that's what we think about, is develop technology in order to scale to that point.
So how is the utility going to handle things at night? Because, I mean, I guess you agree with me that there still has to be a connection.
Right.
That people can't go independent because they won't have a way, unless storage really does some amazing developments, they won't have a way to light up at night.
Correct.
So how is the utility going to provide that power at night going forward?
I think, again, this is part of the broader discussion of the evolution of how the utilities business models.
What source?
I think, again, there are analogies to the cell phone industry, right? Does the utilities provide the transmission and distribution? Is that what they do and maintain, versus who's responsible for generation of power? I think those are all questions that still need to be answered. I think, I don't know how, storage is, I think, still some ways out in terms of being completely off the grid, and I don't think anybody wants to be completely off the grid. The grid has done a really good job in providing stable, reliable power, and I think you want to leverage that. There's been trillions and trillions of dollars of investment in the network already, over 100 years. You don't want to, there's no point in throwing that away.
You got to be able to respond to the need at sunset.
Correct. And I think
that's the big question.
I think there's another interesting trend that's taking place in the area of microgrids, where matching generation and consumption all in one area.
I was going to ask you about why not have a microgrid among PV owners without the utility? Is this possible? There's a lot of legal issues around that.
Yes, there are lots of legal issues. There's a lot of discussion and a lot of looking at the things that are happening. People are looking at microgrids, looking at different generation sources, not just PV. But the fundamental point being you're continually balancing generation and consumption. I think that evolution is taking place. Lots of legal and policy related issues still to be done, but I think the grid is there. I mean, I think the grid is there. A lot of investments taking place, and we can help. And I think there's no point in completely, upending that and redoing it.
Right. We have to bring all the elements together and make make a way for everyone to cooperate on this.
I'm a big believer in that cooperation.
Manufacture in the U.S. or still in China? Are you manufacturing here or in China?
So we are manufacturing in China and in Canada. So, but we use a contract manufacturer. And they have offices they have manufacturing facilities all over the world.
The way it goes.
Yeah, but everything is designed. We are a California company. We are, so we design everything and we do all the testing, and all the innovation happens in California.
Well, I'd like to know more about your operation. I'd like to know how you do, and I'd like to follow your tracks on this. Raghu Belur, Enphase Energy, co-founder, VP of Products. And here today, it's ThinkTech on State of Energy in a ThinkTech talk. And we'll be back, I hope soon, with Raghu Belur and Enphase Energy. For now, aloha.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raghu.
Yep, thank you. Thank you for having me.